Marcus Chen pressed his ear against the ventilation shaft, listening for the familiar hum of the security drones. The underground corridors of New Haven Colony fell silent except for the distant dripping of recycled water somewhere in the depths. At 16, he had memorized every sound the bunker made during its sleep cycle. This was his window of opportunity. The metal grating gave way silently under his practiced hands. 3 years of sneaking through maintenance tunnels had taught him which screws to loosen without making noise. He slipped through the opening like liquid shadow, his slight frame an advantage in the cramped spaces between the colony's living quarters and its restricted sectors. New Haven wasn't much to look at, but it was home to the last 2,000 humans on Earth. The surface had been uninhabitable for 23 years. Ever since the solar flares and atmospheric collapse that followed the resource wars, Marcus had been born underground, raised on recycled air and artificial light. The older residents sometimes talked about blue skies and natural sunlight, but to him those were just stories. His destination tonight was Sector 7, sealed off since before his birth. The colony's archives listed it as environmental hazard zone, but Marcus suspected there was more to the story. His mother, Dr. Sarah Chen, had been part of the original research team that established New Haven. She never talked about what they had been working on before the evacuation protocols were implemented. The tunnel curved downward, leading him deeper into the bunker's forgotten levels. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows on the walls, and the air grew colder with each step. Marcus checked his portable scanner, a device he had cobbled together from salvaged electronics. The readings showed unusual electromagnetic activity ahead, stronger than anything the colony's current systems should produce. He emerged from the tunnel into a vast chamber that took his breath away. The space was easily 3 times larger than the colony's main assembly hall, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. But what dominated the room was the equipment scattered throughout the space like the remains of some technological graveyard. Marcus had seen plenty of pre-war technology in the colony's workshops, but this was different. The shapes were wrong, too organic and flowing for human engineering. Crystalline formations jutted from metallic surfaces that seemed to shift color in the dim light. It was as if someone had tried to merge human technology with something entirely alien. Moving carefully through the maze of abandoned equipment, Marcus made his way toward the center of the chamber, where a massive console dominated the space. The device was roughly circular, about 12 feet in diameter, with what appeared to be a chair or operating position in the center. The surface was covered in patterns that looked like circuitry but moved like living tissue. As he approached, the console began to glow with a soft blue light. Marcus froze, expecting alarms to sound, but the chamber remained silent. Curiosity overcame caution, and he stepped closer. The patterns on the surface were definitely moving now, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. "Hello," he whispered, feeling foolish for talking to a machine. The console's glow intensified, and suddenly a holographic display materialized above its surface. Text appeared in the air, written in familiar English letters, but arranged in patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Genetic scan complete. Authorization confirmed. Welcome, Marcus Chen. Marcus stumbled backward, his heart racing. The machine knew his name. More text appeared, scrolling too fast for him to read everything, but he caught fragments. Temporal displacement, quantum entanglement, emergency protocols. "What are you?" he asked aloud. "I am a trans-temporal communication array, constructed through collaborative effort between human and Zephyrian technologies. I have been waiting for you." The word Zephyrian sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Every child in the colony knew that name from the history lessons. The Zephyrians were the alien race that had first contacted humanity 50 years ago, offering advanced technology in exchange for what they called cultural exchange. The partnership had lasted less than a decade before relations deteriorated into the resource wars that eventually led to Earth's surface becoming uninhabitable. Waiting for me. I don't understand. Incoming. Transmission detected. Temporal origin. Timeline designation. Alpha 7. Sender identification. MC. The holographic display shifted, showing what appeared to be a communication interface. A new message appeared, but this one was different. The text was handwritten, scrawled in a hasty script that looked disturbingly familiar. Marcus, if you're reading this, then the timeline is still intact. This is going to sound impossible, but I'm you. Or rather, I'm what you become in a different timeline. I don't have long before they find me, so listen carefully. In 18 months, the Zephyrians will return to Earth. They're not coming to trade. They're coming to harvest what's left of humanity. Marcus read the message 3 times before it sank in. His future self was somehow sending him messages through time. It was insane, impossible, but the evidence was floating in the air before him. You're lying, he said to the console. Time travel is just science fiction. Another message appeared, this one longer and more detailed. I know you're skeptical. You're thinking about the physics lessons Mom gave you about causality and paradoxes. But this isn't time travel in the traditional sense. The Zephyrians exist partially outside linear time. When they modified my DNA to keep me alive after the invasion, they accidentally created a temporal link between timelines. I can send information backward, but I can't change what's already happened to me. The message continued, describing details about Marcus's life that no one else could know. His secret hiding spot where he kept his electronics projects. The scar on his left shoulder from when he fell off a maintenance ladder at age 12. The recurring dream about flying through star-filled skies. How do I know this isn't some kind of trick? Marcus asked. Because you're going to ask me about the birthday message Mom left for you before she died. The one you've never told anyone about. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. 3 years ago, his mother had died in a reactor maintenance accident, but before her death, she had hidden a message in his personal terminal, programmed to appear on his 13th birthday. The message had been private, personal, and he had never shared its contents with anyone. She told you that the work she did before the evacuation was important, but that she hoped you would find a better way to use it. She said that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from the most desperate situations, and that you shouldn't be afraid to trust your instincts, even when everyone else thinks you're wrong. Marcus sank into the chair at the center of the console. The message was word for word what his mother had written. There was no way anyone else could know those exact words. You're really me, he whispered. I'm what you become if you don't change things. In my timeline, we weren't prepared for the Zephyrian invasion. Most of the colony was killed in the first wave. I survived because I was in this chamber when it happened. The console's shielding protected me from their initial assault, but I couldn't save anyone else. The weight of the revelation settled over Marcus like a physical force. His future self had lived through the destruction of everything he cared about. The thought of losing his friends, his neighbors, everyone he had ever known, was almost too much to bear. What do you want me to do? He asked. Learn to use the console. The Zephyrians designed it as a weapon, but human ingenuity can turn it into a shield. You have abilities you don't even know about yet, Marcus. The genetic modifications Mum carried in her DNA were passed down to you. You can interface with this technology in ways that pure humans can't. Marcus looked down at his hands, trying to imagine what his future self meant. He had always been good with electronics, able to understand complex systems intuitively. But alien technology was something else entirely. I need proof, he said. If you're really from the future, tell me something that's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, Colony Administrator Walsh will announce new rationing protocols. The water recycling system in Section 3 will fail, and they'll need to reroute power from the backup generators. Dr. Harrison will volunteer to fix it, but he'll make the problem worse because he doesn't understand the alien components that were integrated into the system after the first year. Marcus memorized the prediction. If it came true, he would have to accept that everything his future self was telling him was real. There's more, the message continued. The console isn't just a communication device, it's a key to understanding. How the Zephyrians think, how they plan, how they fight. If you can learn to use it properly, you might be able to give humanity a fighting asterisk. The holographic display flickered, and the message began to fade. The connection is weakening. I can only maintain contact for short periods before the temporal distortion becomes too dangerous. But I'll try to send more information when I can. Remember, Marcus, you're not just fighting for our timeline. You're fighting for all the possible futures where humanity survives. The last words disappeared, leaving Marcus alone in the chamber with the softly glowing console. The silence felt oppressive after the revelation of the past hour. He sat in the chair, staring at the alien technology that supposedly held the key to humanity's survival. The walk back to his quarters felt like moving through a dream. Everything looked the same, but Marcus knew that his world had fundamentally changed. Tomorrow, he would find out if his future self's prediction came true, and if it did, he would have to decide whether to trust a stranger who claimed to be himself, or to dismiss the entire experience as some kind of hallucination. But deep down, he already knew the truth. The console had recognized his DNA, known. His name accessed memories that only he possessed. His future self was real, and the invasion was coming as he crawled back through the ventilation shaft toward his room. Marcus began to formulate a plan. If the prediction about the water system came true, he would return to the chamber and begin learning to use the alien technology. He would study every message, memorize every detail, and prepare for a war that most of humanity didn't even know was coming. The future might be written, but Marcus Chen was determined to rewrite it. The console had called him by name, recognized him as someone special. Maybe his future self was wrong about being unable to change the past. Maybe, with enough determination and ingenuity, even time itself could be conquered. After all, he was human, and humans had a habit of achieving the impossible when their backs were against the wall. Marcus barely slept that night. He lay in his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling and replaying every word of the conversation with his future self. The logical part of his mind insisted it had to be some kind of elaborate hoax, but the emotional part knew better. The console had felt real, alive somehow, and the messages had contained information that no one else could possibly know. Morning came with the familiar buzz of the colony's wake-up chimes. Marcus dressed quickly and made his way to the central dining hall, where colonists gathered for their daily meal rations. The atmosphere was normal, people chatting quietly about work assignments and maintenance schedules. Everything seemed exactly as it should be. Then Administrator Walsh stepped up to the central podium, his expression grim. "Attention, everyone. I'm afraid we have some challenges to address today. The water recycling system in Section 3 has experienced a critical failure. We're implementing emergency rationing protocols immediately, and will need to redirect power from the backup generators to compensate." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The prediction was coming true, exactly as his future self had described. "Dr. Harrison has volunteered to lead the repair efforts," Walsh continued. "We expect to have the system back online within 48 hours. Around the hall, people began murmuring concerns about water supplies and power allocation. Marcus barely heard them. If this prediction was accurate, then everything else his future self had told him was probably true as well. The invasion, the console, the genetic modifications he apparently carried in his DNA. He spent the day in a daze, going through the motions of his assigned duties, while his mind raced with possibilities. By evening, news had spread through the colony that Dr. Harrison's initial repair attempts had made the water system worse, requiring additional specialists to fix the damage he had caused. Another detail that matched his future self's prediction perfectly. That night, Marcus made his way back to Sector 7 with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. The console responded to his approach immediately, its surface glowing with welcoming blue light. The holographic display materialized before he even reached the chair. Incoming transmission detected. Temporal origin. Timeline designation. Alpha 7. Sender identification. MC. The message that appeared was longer than the previous day's communication, written in the same hurried script. "Marcus, I can see from the temporal echoes that you witnessed the water system failure. Now you know I'm telling the truth. Today I'm going to explain what you need to understand about the console and about yourself. But first, I need to warn you about something else. In 3 days, colony security will detect unusual energy readings from Sector 7. They'll send a team to investigate. You need to be ready." Marcus read the warning twice, memorizing every detail. His future self continued. "The console is more than just a communication device. It's a hybrid of human and Zephyrian technology, created during the early years of contact when relations were still peaceful. The Zephyrians exist partially outside normal space-time, which is how they developed faster-than-light travel. They offered to share this technology with humanity, but only with individuals who carried specific genetic markers." The message paused, and Marcus could almost feel his future self gathering the courage to continue. "Mum was part of the original contact team, Marcus. She volunteered for the genetic modification process that would allow her to interface with Zephyrian technology. The modifications were subtle, designed to be passed down through generations. You inherited those modifications, which is why the console recognizes you." Marcus stared at the floating text, trying to process the implications. His mother had been part of an alien genetic experiment, and she had passed those modifications to him. It explained so much about his intuitive understanding of complex electronics, his ability to troubleshoot systems that baffled other technicians. The Zephyrians called us bridge builders, humans who could serve as intermediaries between our species. But they weren't interested in equal partnership. They wanted servants, beings who could understand their technology but remained fundamentally human enough to control. The resource wars began when humanity realized what the Zephyrians really intended. The message continued, detailing the history that Marcus had never learned in school. The Zephyrians had withdrawn from Earth after the wars began, taking their technology with them. But they had left behind monitoring stations, hidden facilities like the one in Sector 7, designed to gather intelligence about humanity's development. In my timeline, they returned when they determined that humanity had been sufficiently weakened by the surface disasters. The colonies were easy targets, isolated and dependent on technology we didn't fully understand. But you have an advantage. I didn't have. You know they're coming. Marcus leaned forward, studying the technical diagrams that began appearing in the holographic display. The console was incredibly complex, but as he examined the patterns, he began to see how the various components worked together. His modified genetics were apparently allowing him to understand concepts that should have been beyond human comprehension. The key to defeating them lies in understanding their weakness, the message continued. The Zephyrians' existence outside linear time makes them incredibly powerful, but it also makes them vulnerable. They have difficulty adapting to rapid changes in timeline probability. If you can create enough temporal distortion, you can disrupt their ability to coordinate their attacks. More diagrams appeared, showing how the console could be modified to generate temporal interference patterns. The modifications would require components that didn't exist in the colony's current inventory. But Marcus could see how to improvise alternatives using the salvage technology scattered throughout the chamber. I need to tell you something else, Marcus. In my timeline, I didn't just survive the invasion. I was captured by the Zephyrians and used as a test subject for their experiments. They modified my DNA further, trying to create a perfect bridge between human and Zephyrian consciousness. The process was unpleasant. The clinical language couldn't hide the pain behind the words. Marcus felt sick thinking about what his future self had endured, but their experiments gave me abilities I never had before. I can see across timelines, communicate through temporal barriers, and most importantly, I can understand their strategic thinking. I know how they plan their attacks, how they coordinate their forces, and how they can be defeated. The message shifted to include detailed tactical information about Zephyrian military doctrine. Their forces moved in synchronized waves, coordinated by temporal communication networks. But if those networks could be disrupted, their armies would become isolated and vulnerable. You have 18 months to prepare, Marcus. Use that time to modify the console, to learn to use your abilities, and to convince the colony leadership that the threat is real. I know it sounds impossible, but you have something I never had: advance warning and the knowledge to act on it. The transmission began to flicker, and Marcus realized that his future self was running out of time to maintain. The connection. Remember, you're not just fighting for New Haven Colony. There are other survivors scattered across the planet, hidden enclaves that the Zephyrians haven't found yet. If you can coordinate a defense, if you can teach others to use the hybrid technology, humanity might have a chance. The final message was brief but urgent. Asterisk. The timeline is already beginning to shift because of our communication. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to maintain contact, but I believe in you, Marcus. We humans have always been at our best when facing impossible odds. Don't let them turn us into something we're not. The holographic display faded, leaving Marcus alone with the softly glowing console. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. In 18 months, an alien invasion would arrive at Earth. The survival of humanity depended on his ability to master technology. He barely understood and convinced adults who would think he was crazy. But as he sat in the alien chair, studying the patterns that flowed across the console's surface, Marcus felt something awakening within him. The genetic modifications his mother had carried were more than just enhanced intuition. They were a bridge between two entirely different ways of thinking, two different approaches to understanding the universe. He began to work, his hands moving across the console surface with growing confidence. The patterns responded to his touch, rearranging themselves into new configurations. Technical knowledge flowed through his mind, concepts that he had never learned but somehow understood. Over the following days, Marcus established a routine. He attended to his regular duties during the day, maintaining the facade of a normal 16-year-old colonist. But every night, he returned to Sector 7 to work with the console and receive new messages from his future self. The transmissions became shorter and more urgent as time passed. His future self reported increasing difficulty maintaining the temporal link, and warned that the timeline changes were accelerating. But each message contained crucial information about Zephyrian technology, tactical doctrine, and the locations of other hidden installations around the globe. On the third night, just as his future self had predicted, colony security detected the energy readings from Sector 7. Marcus was ready. He had spent the day programming false readings into the sensor network, creating the illusion that the unusual energy was coming from a malfunctioning piece of pre-war equipment. When the security team arrived, they found Marcus in the chamber, apparently trying to repair a damaged communications array. His cover story was perfect. He was a curious teenager who had discovered old equipment and was trying to get it working again. The security officers were annoyed but not suspicious, and they ordered him to stay out of restricted areas in the future. Marcus nodded obediently, but he knew that his real work was just beginning. The console had taught him more than just technical knowledge. It had awakened something in his human spirit, a determination to fight for his species, survival that burned brighter than any alien technology. The Zephyrians thought they could return to Earth and find a weakened, divided humanity ready for conquest. They were about to discover that humans were never more dangerous than when they were protecting their families, their friends, and their future. Marcus Chen, 16 years old and carrying alien modifications in his DNA, smiled as he began planning humanity's defense. The timeline was changing, and for the first time in his life, he was genuinely excited about the future. After all, he was human, and humans had a long history of turning their enemies' weapons against them. The war for Earth's survival would begin in 18 months. But the real battle had already started in the mind of a teenager who refused to accept defeat. Asterisk.